Most people do not enter into a marriage thinking that they are going to become caregiver to their spouse, especially when they get married at such a young age. But that is just what happened to my friend Kristine. And she is here today to tell her story of her life with Walter. Kristine, thank you so much for being here and for being willing to share your story.
Thank you, RuthAnn. It's an honor that you asked me to be here to share my story.
I know that many people who have been long-term caregivers or who are still long-term caregivers are going to get a lot out of your story. And I want to hear that. But first, I want to talk about something else. When someone dies after a long-term illness, their memory is often defined by that illness. But Walter was so much more than his illness. Walter was not ECD. I would like you to tell me about Walter. Tell me who he was. Tell me what you loved about him. Tell me what you didn't love about him. I want to hear who Walter was as a person, not who Walter was as a patient.
I mean, Walter was, you're right, he wasn't just ECD. He was a son, he was a brother. He was an uncle who loved his nieces and his nephews. He was one of the kindest people I've ever met. He was the kind of person that if you needed it, he would give you his last $5. And I've seen him do that. He has given the shirt off his back. He's given gloves, boots to people who needed it, total strangers. Oof. He loved me most. That's one of the things I miss the most, is being loved by him. Every day, every morning. He would just say, "Good morning, beautiful." And I miss hearing that so much. And I didn't realize I was going to miss that until it was gone. I wish I had recorded that. But that generous heart that he had sometimes was one of the things that would really annoy me, because he would come home and say, "Oh, I need to get a new pair of gloves." And I would say, "What do you mean? You have gloves?" "Well, no, I was driving and there was somebody who was walking on the road and I picked them up and took them to wherever it was, the destination that they were traveling to, and I would talk to them. And they mentioned that, oh, they didn't have gloves for the winter and it was cold out, so he just gave them his gloves." And I was like, "Oh my gosh." I mean, he had such a generous heart. He didn't even think, it did not, you know, dawn on him that it was like, "Oh, now I'm going to be without gloves." But I would say, "It's very thoughtful that you're doing that, Walter, but now we have to spend money to buy gloves for you that you had." And he would just say, "Yeah, but they didn't have the means to buy the gloves and we do." And it was just like, yeah, that's the kind of person he was. He, God-fearing, God-loving, walked the walk. So he was just that kind of person.
I love that so much. I wish I would have gotten a chance to meet him before he was diagnosed with ECD.
He was a good guy. He was one of the good ones. Yeah, it was like you said, he was a musician.
Hmm?
He was, he took some guitar lessons, but he sort of self-taught, and he loved sitting outside and strumming his guitar and writing lyrics and putting music to those lyrics. Um, and that was something that he really wanted to do, was to share that with the world. And in some small part he did. He was able to share that with our church. Um, During Memorial Day and the 4th of July, we would have festivals downtown and he would play um, during those. So he would play in coffee houses around town. He really just wanted to share his music with people.
Well, I love that you've shared all of that. It gives just a much better picture of who Walter was as a person, not who Walter was as a patient. I love it. Let's get into your story. Let's start at the beginning. Can you tell me how you met Walter and what those early years were like?
So it was 1995. I was 21. Walter was 33. We met at work. And when I first met him, he was just kind of, well, he's always been an extrovert. So he just has that personality. Um, and I'm an introvert. So I'm more reserved. And so I just thought, gosh, she's kind of show offy. Um, it seems like a lot. And he thought, oh gosh, she's so quiet. She's stuck up. She's, how people are always assuming people who are introverts are just, I guess they think we're stuck up. I don't know. We're not. We're just quiet. That's what he thought. Um, and then one night, we were leaving and we just struck up a conversation. And we found ourselves talking in the parking lot for over 2 hours. And it was just so easy, effortless. And I just thought, gosh, this guy, he's not what I thought he was. He's a really nice guy. Um, and after that, we just became more friends. Um, and then after a couple of months, he left the job. And, again, it's 1995. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have social media. So, and we had never exchanged phone numbers. And I was just like, well, I guess that's that. So one Saturday, I was sitting at home. I was still living with my parents at the time. The phone rang. I looked at the caller ID. It's a local number, but I didn't recognize it. Thought it was a telemarketer, but I still picked up and said hello. And then on the other end, I hear, is this Kristine? And I was hesitantly saying, yes, this is Walter. And I just immediately sat up straight, like fixing my hair, checking my face. And he was like, I've been going through the phone, I've been calling all the Bells in the phone book because my last name was Bell, until I got to you. And I was kind of relieved that, my dad's name was Howard because it starts with the letter H. And so he didn't have too far to go down, to get to me. But yeah, I was just like, wow, I can't believe that he did that he had, gone through the phone book to find me. Again, this was 1995, so no social media, no cell phones. We had never exchanged, our phone numbers because we were work friends. But that just meant so much to me that he did that. And so we had made plans to hang out. And we went to the movies and then out to dinner. And after that, we just was pretty much together after that.
For young people, they have no idea what we had to go through to find somebody in the old days before the internet, before social media. And when somebody tracks you down like that, that they're really serious about it because they had to put forth so much effort to do it. I love that.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Sometimes it does make me sad about the youth of, they don't, they had no clue, um, everything is just so instant now. And, 30 years ago, yeah, if you lost contact with somebody, it was really difficult to track them down. Um, we had these things called phone books that had everyone's, number in it listed. And, that is how you tracked somebody down.
Well, what was life like for you in those early days then? How long did you date before you got married? What kinds of things did you like to do? And what kinds of plans did you have for your future?
We dated for about 4 years before we got married. We got married in the spring of 1999. Still living in Columbia, South Carolina. We had discussed, did we want to stay in Columbia? Did we want to move somewhere else? We both had agreed that we did not want to live in Columbia. Walter went to school in Western North Carolina, loved the area. My maternal grandparents had a house in Asheville, North Carolina. So I was definitely familiar with the area, and I've always loved it. I've always loved it here, always wanted to live here. So when we were discussing where we were going to live, it was pretty much a no-brainer. Well, yep, we're going to live in Western North Carolina. So we settled on a little town about 30 miles west of Asheville. It's just quiet, it's idyllic, I love it here. I love looking out my window at the mountains. I mean, not many people can say they have a view like I have. It's, downtown is so quaint. When we first moved here, the house that we lived in did not have a washer dryer hookup. So once a week, we'd go to the laundromat and do laundry. And then we would have lunch. And I mean, it was just like the simplest, mundane task, but we enjoyed doing that because we were together. We don't live too far from the parkway. So on my weekends off from working, or his weekend off from working, we drive up the parkway. There's sweet little towns in the area. We would just visit those and be like a tourist in our own community kind of thing. But I mean, it was just, that's what we enjoyed. It wasn't anything big that we would do. It was just being together. We just really enjoyed being together.
There is nothing like spending time with someone you love. And it makes the things that you think are mundane, it takes the mundane out of it.
Yes. Every year on our anniversary, we would look at each other and be like, oh yeah, that first year went by really fast. It doesn't seem like it's been a year. Year 5. Wow, it's been 5 years. Like it's, 10 years, it's 15 years. I guess our relation, it was effortless in a way. I mean, not saying that we didn't have our challenges, but we looked forward to coming home to each other. And I know there are people out there that don't have that have never had that. That breaks my heart. I wish everybody could experience a love like we had. People still come up to me now, 4.5 years after Walter has passed, and still will talk about our relationship. Like, I would just watch you two and be in awe. You could see the love that y'all have for each other. I mean, it was undeniable. And it was like, yeah, I had it.
Well, for people who haven't experienced that kind of love, do you have any advice for them? Because it sounds like the two of you just made it work. So, was there anything special that you did, or was it just who you were to each other when you finally realized that this was the person that you wanted to be with?
That's a good question. And I would have to say our faith as Christians, that it's, any relationship has to be a strong foundation, Christian based. I prayed for a man like Walter. I prayed for a long time. We were friends. He was my best friend. So we had that friendship before it became romantic. We just always appreciated each other. For people who don't have what I was able to have, I would say, pray for that person. Pray for God to send you the person that He has designed for you. There's a lot of give and take in marriage. It is hard work. I mean, I know talking about my relationship with Walter, it just sounds like, well, it was just, rainbows and unicorns, but it was not. It was hard work. They say marriage is 50-50, and there are a lot of times that it's not 50-50, it's 20-80. And definitely once Walter was diagnosed and was, once the disease really started to progress, like that dynamic shifted. And so it was definitely I was putting in more because I had to. He wasn't able to. So you just have to be aware of that. You have to be aware of, sometimes you're going to be given more than the other person. And then there are times that person will give more that you're not able to. And that was definitely true when I was in nursing school. When I was in nursing school, that was my focus. I had to get through those 2 years. And Walter really stepped up and, he did more. He did the housework and the grocery shopping and the cooking and the laundry. And because I wasn't able, I was like, either if I wasn't at work, I was in school or I was studying. So he gave more. Then he got sick and those roles changed, and I had to be the one to give more to care for him.
So, really, sounds like just you had a really good partnership and you had good communication. That was so important for you to have because you didn't know what was coming. But having that relationship that you did is probably what got you through all those really difficult years.
Yes, yeah, it did. I will agree.
Before Walter's diagnosis, what were some of the big plans the two of you had for your life? Did you want to travel? Did you have plans for a family, career? What were your plans?
Yes, we did want to start a family. That was definitely the goal after I graduated from nursing school. I would work for a couple of years and then we would start a family. And then we would save for retirement and we would travel. We would talk about places that we wanted to go. I remember one of them was Antarctica. He came to me one day and he was like, "Hey, what do you think about going to Antarctica?" And I was like, "Well, it sounds pretty cool, kind of cold. But yeah, that seems like that'd be really cool to do." And unfortunately, that was something we weren't able to do. But I managed to get there for my 50th birthday. I went to Antarctica um, and carried my little memory rock that I have with Walter's name on it so that he could be there with me in spirit. But yeah, that, we definitely had plans to do that. We wanted to travel. We wanted a family. It just wasn't in the cards for us.
That's so hard. How soon into your marriage did you start noticing symptoms, and what were those first symptoms like?
So we were married in the spring of 1999, and around 2001, Walter started to have headaches, a little bit of blurry vision. So we went to the doctor, and he referred us to a neurologist, so that they could do an MRI of the head to see if there was something going, if they could see something going on. And I remember the neurologist telling us, oh, well, it looks like your pituitary gland is a little bigger than it should be. So your options are, we can either just continue to monitor it, or we could try and go in and do a biopsy and see what's going on. At the time, Walter chose to just monitor. He really didn't want to have a procedure if it wasn't necessary. And then it actually ended up being the best choice that he did not have that done at the time. So we just, we'll monitor it and see what happens, and the symptoms would come and go. And then he started to develop like excessive thirst. I remember one day we were getting ready to go out and run some errands, and he just took a liter bottle of water and just downed it. And then we get in the car, we go half a mile down the road from the house, and he is like, at the first convenience store, you've got to stop. I've got to have something to drink. I was like, you just had a liter of water, and you're thirsty. He's like, I feel like I am dying of thirst. And I just thought, oh my goodness, I think he might have diabetes. So we went back to the doctor and had him tested for diabetes mellitus. That came back negative, but he said, I do want to test you for diabetes insipidus. So we thought, oh, okay. So he had him tested for a urine test, a blood test, and a water deprivation test where he had to go 12 hours without drinking any fluids. And then he would go into the office, and then they would test his urine again. And that drive to the doctor's office after going like 15 hours without anything to drink was very stressful for both of us. Walter, he sort of developed this when he was anxious. He would start tapping his leg. And so I knew that was a sign that something was up. And so here we are driving, and he's doing that because he just wants something to drink so badly. So I'm like trying to drive to the doctor's office and starting to become very anxious because now he's tapping his leg, and I'm trying to get there as quickly and safely as possible. And thankfully it was like early in the morning for this test. We get to the doctor's office, he goes in, he gives them the specimen. I'm in the waiting room waiting for him. He comes out and he was like, I need something to drink right now. And I was like, luckily I'm prepared. Here's some water for you. And he just drank it in 2.5 seconds. It was gone. But the test did reveal that he did have diabetes insipidus. And so they did have to put him on a medication for it. And that did help those symptoms. And then he was eventually able to wean off of that medication. Um, but other symptoms started popping up. He started having pain in his legs. And I thought, okay, well, you are an active human being. You're in your mid 40s now at this point. You were a runner in high school. You were a runner in college. You know, maybe this is arthritis. So back to the doctor. No, actually, you don't have arthritis. I'm not sure what's causing the pain in your leg. And it was just a series of one thing after another, and going to the doctor and being told, no, it is not that. And one day we were at the doctor's office and hearing yet again, well, nope, it's not that. And Walter just broke down and started crying. And he was like, I feel like people think I am making these symptoms up. I feel like people think I'm a hypochondriac, but I feel like something is really wrong. I can feel it. And our doctor, our primary care physician, well, I will never forget this. He just looked at Walter and he just said, I honestly believe that there is something going on. We just haven't figured it out yet. And just that simple sentence, we just haven't figured it out yet, meant, yes, I believe that there is something going on. We need to continue running more tests to see what it is. Like, I'm not giving up on you. I don't believe that it's psychological. I'm not going to send you to a psychiatrist. There's something physically going on, and we're going to figure it out. It's just going to take time. We just haven't found the right test yet. And that meant the world to me. It meant the world to Walter, because he could have easily just, written Walter off as, well, this is a mental health issue, when in fact, he honestly believed that there was in fact something wrong. And we just kept on until we got the diagnosis.
How long did it take for you to get the diagnosis?
It took about 6 years, 6 years of running tests, 6 years of being told it's not this, it is not that.
That is a long time to wait for a diagnosis. And all of that uncertainty that you were facing at that time, it must have felt like the earth was shifting beneath you. How did you handle your feelings about that?
It was very frustrating. It was frustrating to see Walter go through this, through the, no, it's not this, no, it's not that. When you're dealing with a rare illness, just trying to, it's basically like putting a puzzle together, a very large puzzle with very small pieces. And so each test that we went through, we were able to eliminate, it's not this, it's not that. And it just took a long time putting this puzzle together before we could see the full picture.
I like that description of putting a puzzle together. That is so accurate for when you're trying to find answers for someone who has a rare disease, and that just gives a really good picture of what it was like. So we've got a lot more to cover. I do want to hear about your or about the tests that Walter had to go through to get that answer, because I know that a lot of people don't understand just how intense it can be finding those answers and all the things that you have to go through. So initially there was the slightly enlarged pituitary gland, and then the excessive thirst that led to a diagnosis of diabetes insipidus. He had headaches, he had dizziness, and he had bone pain, and was having all of this testing done and was not getting any answers. And if I remember correctly, Kristine, it took about 6 years to get that diagnosis. But I'm wondering, what were some of, can you tell me a little bit more about some of the testing that he went through and what that was like for you during that time? Because that is so frustrating when you know something's wrong and you're not getting any answers.
Yes, RuthAnn, it is very frustrating. So it was about 2006. So I was it had been a year since I had graduated from nursing school. And Walter, I remember him coming to me and saying, I really want to see what, I really want to focus on what is going on with me. And I agreed because he was still having bone pain that wasn't being relieved by NSAIDs like Tylenol or ibuprofen. The doctor tried him on a medication that's now been discontinued called Darvocet, which is a narcotic that wasn't relieving his pain. He was still having intermittent headaches. He was the thirst, though, that one we seemed to have under control. But yeah, he really was just like, I really want to see if we can figure out what's going on now. So I was in agreement, and we went back to our primary care physician, who once again referred us to the neurologist. The neurologist ordered another MRI because at this point it had been 4-5 years since the last MRI of his brain. So we scheduled that. We went in, and this time the news was a little different. It was a little more shocking to hear. He said, well, now it looks like your pituitary is twice the size it was from the last image. And we were a bit floored by that. So he once again said, I would like to do a biopsy. And we did agree to have that done. It's a transnasal biopsy where you have to go through the nose to get to the pituitary. So that was going to require him being in the hospital for several days. He would be in neuro trauma ICU for 3 days after that biopsy. But I remember sitting in the waiting room, and then the doctor called and said, okay, everything went well. But his pituitary is actually normal in size. It's not, twice the size that the imaging was showing. So at first I was relieved. I said, well, yay, that's great. And he said, well, yes and no. He said, it's telling me that there's something further back in the brain. And I went, oh, yeah, that's not so great. So after the 4 days that Walter was in the hospital recovering from the biopsy, we were referred to an ophthalmologist in the area who did an ultrasound. We went into the office, and he had this little wand. They numbed the eyes. They put the wand on the eye, and he's able to visualize what is back there. And he said, yes, I definitely see something back here. So I would like to do a biopsy. And we said, okay. This one was going to be a little trickier. This one was going to, when he went through the possibilities of what could go wrong, he says it's a delicate procedure. We numb the eye. We have to go under the eye orbit to get to what is back there. You've got nerve endings back there. He said one false move, I could nick a nerve, and you could either have permanent double vision or blindness. And of course, you know, you want to be educated on what could possibly happen, but hearing those, it's definitely nerve-wracking. And even as a nurse, you know, it's different when it's your spouse and you hear these things versus being a nurse and, you know, on the other end of things. But you know, this was he was a brilliant doctor. Everything went beautifully. He was able to get a specimen. He said it was the smallest sample he could possibly get without doing any damage. And then he said, I have never seen anything like this before. It is almost like it's a rubbery type tissue. I've never seen this. So they sent it off to the pathology department at the hospital. They could not identify it, so it had to be sent to St. Louis, Missouri, to a special pathology department. They diagnosed it as a xanthogranuloma. A xanthogranuloma does not typically pass the blood-brain barrier, so you would not see it in the brain. You would typically see it in the trunk. So from there, we were referred to a hematologist and oncologist. So he was an oncologist, but he was also a hematologist dealing with blood disorders. So we go in and we meet this man, this physician, and he said, you know, I want to test you for this very rare disease. I don't think that this is what you have, but I want to test it so we can at least eliminate, you know, process of elimination, which of course we were so used to at this point, and really didn't think anything of it. Didn't, you know, just was like, yeah, we'll go in and have that and you'll tell us we don't have that. So he sent Walter to have a bone scan. So it's a scan that basically what it does is it scans your bones. They were looking for this particular disease. And if Walter had it, he would light up like a Christmas tree. And if he didn't have it, there would be nothing to see. It would just be a regular image. So Walter went in and had the test. He had it done. And then I remember I was at work and he called with the news that they had figured out what Walter had been, what he'd been dealing with all this time. And that was Erdheim-Chester disease. And I remember Walter calling me at work and he said, they figured it out. We've got a diagnosis. And he said, I'm going to be okay. That was one of the first things he said. I'm going to be okay. They figured out what it is. And I said, okay. And hung up the phone and immediately Googled Erdheim-Chester disease because I had never heard of this. I did not know what this was. And was shocked. 3 pages dedicated to the same medical article. It was and I mean, I'm a nurse, but even I didn't understand a lot of the medical terminology. I mean, I'm having to like Google what this means and what that means. And just remember the scanning this article as quickly as I could and then seeing like, is there a life expectancy? It says there's no cure, but what's the life expectancy of this? And when I read what it said, the life expectancy of somebody diagnosed with Erdheim-Chester disease, if they are fortunate enough to be diagnosed with this, is 3 to 5 years. And my heart sank. I just could not believe it. And I don't know if Walter had, Googled this before he called me. I don't know if he was telling me to give me false hope. I'm going to be okay. You know, um, yeah, that floored me. I wasn't expecting that. We were thrilled that we got a diagnosis, but now we've got this uncertainty of what is this? What is this disease? Um, yeah.
How did that news affect your plans for the future then? Because now you've learned that the prognosis is not great. And I'm assuming you went home and you talked to Walter about it. What was that like? And then how did you plan for your future after that?
So yeah, I go home and I, said, so I Googled what Erdheim-Chester is. Um, and I had printed it off and brought it home, like, here it is. I said, but it's saying 3 to 5 years life expectancy. And he, just sort of brushed it off and he was like, it's okay, I'm gonna be okay. I'm gonna be okay. And I was like, okay, but what is this? So, we of course had the follow-up appointment with the oncologist to discuss treatment. Um, and at the time, so this is 2007, and at the time, the medication that they were treating Erdheim-Chester disease with was interferon. It's an antiviral. It treats certain cancers. It treats certain viruses. And so we're going to start you on this. It's going to be an injection once every couple of days. I think it was 3 times a week he was doing the injections. We're going to do scans every 3 months. So you'll be coming in every 3 months. We'll follow to see. I mean, the doctor was very honest. He was like, I've never treated anybody with this. He said, I just happened to study it in medical school some 25, 30 years ago, that he still remembered what this was. But he had never treated anybody with Erdheim-Chester disease, did not know of any physician that had treated a patient with Erdheim-Chester disease. So, of course, he had to do his research and discovered a physician called Dr. Caregiver. She, at the time, was living in Houston, Texas. She was working at MD Anderson. She had patients who had Erdheim-Chester disease and somehow stumbled across that interferon was keeping these growths, not necessarily shrinking them, but keeping them from growing. So that was the medication. That was the treatment of choice. And we were sitting there and, you're trying to feverishly write down notes and take down everything and just absorb everything that you can. Because you're just, you're both in shock. Not only have you just found out you've got a seriously rare disease, but yeah, so here's a drug we're going to try because this is what we know what's treating it. And we sat there and we asked him, we were like, what's Walter's prognosis? The research that I did from this one article says he has 3 to 5 years. And he just looked at us and very honestly said, I don't know what your life expectancy is. I just don't know. And of course, we just sat there and we were stunned and we both just started crying because we did not know what our future was going to look like after that. You walk into an appointment thinking things are going to go one way, and now we're just like, what do we do? Like, we're looking at each other. What do we do? We don't know. And that's where your faith comes in to play. It's a big part of getting us through any trial in our life. We just gave it to God. God will get us through this, no matter what the outcome is. God's going to get us through this. There's a plan. There is a reason that you have this disease, Walter. There is a disease. There is a reason why this happened. We always believed that. We were never, and I don't know how this is for other people who, other couples, families who are dealing with ECD. I've actually never asked, but for us, we were never angry about it. It happened, you know, sickness happens in life.
I would agree with you. Your faith plays a huge role in that. You know that God's got a plan and you just trust in his plan and you just keep moving forward one day at a time, doing what you can, still living your life and not just existing, still living, because you're still living with the person who means the most to you in this world and you're doing it as a team. And I think that that makes a huge difference too.
Yes, I agree. I agree. So once we got the diagnosis and started the treatment, things kind of shifted differently. This is where the roles in our marriage, you guys could see now, started to change, because now I'm not just a spouse, but I'm also going to be a caregiver. Even though at the time Walter did not look sick, he was still fairly active, still working. If you looked at him at the time, you would not have thought that this is somebody who has a rare illness. So he started the interferon. I want to say about 2 weeks into the medication, he had an episode at work. And I get a call. I'm at home. I get a call. I'm getting ready to go to work, start my shift. There's, I want to say there's like 4 messages on my answering machine. And it's, the first one was, "Don't worry, Kristine, we've got your shift covered. You just go and take care of what you need to take care of." And I was like, what is what? And then the next one was like, "Hey, Kristine, it's so-and-so, this is at my job. You know, we just got a call from the hospital. You know, you do what you need to do. Don't worry about it." And then I was like, what happened? What has happened? And then it's Walter. And he is, "Hey, honey, I'm in the emergency room. I'm okay. I just had an episode at work, so they brought me to the hospital to get me checked out." And then the fourth one was the nurse from the hospital. "Hi, this is nurse so-and-so from, you know, the hospital. Your husband was just brought in. Just like give us a call when you get this message or come on to the hospital." And I was like out the door, like speeding to the hospital, because I'm still like, I don't know what's going on. What's going on? What happened? Running into the ED, like, my husband's in there. And they let me through. And he's, you know, in one of the rooms, and he's hooked up to, you know, telemetry, which monitors your heart rhythms, checks for arrhythmias. And he's like, I'm okay, because I just started having heart palpitation, and then I got short of breath, and it just dropped me to my knees. So they brought me into the hospital to be evaluated. And I was like, okay, like, what happened? What could have caused this? The doctor, the admitting hospitalist, said, "Oh, we're admitting him to the hospital. We've already contacted the cardiologist. He's going to go over all of his tests and imaging that we've done. And then we'll, he'll come up and tell you what the plan is. And you're like, oh, okay. Like, what is happening right now? So we get him settled into the room, and then a little while later, the cardiologist comes in, and he, basically said, I mean, your EKG is normal, your lab's like a troponin level, which, is a lab that tests the protein in the heart, and if there's damage, it would tell you if there was a cardiac event happening. This looks normal too. Normally we would order a stress test for you, but seeing how you got short of breath and had already having heart palpitations, I want to bypass the stress test and go in and do a cardiac catheterization. And I was like, oh, this is serious. So we're gonna do that, tomorrow morning. We'll do the cardiac cath and go from there and see, this test determines if you've got a blockage. If you have a blockage in your arteries, then they have to put in a stent. And I'm thinking, this can't be, he can't have that, because he's the healthiest person I know. This is somebody who exercises, he eats fresh fruits and vegetables. Like there can't be anything in his arteries. There can be no plaque buildup. So he has the cath the next day, and I'm in the waiting room, and then the cardiologist comes in after the test, and he was like, well, it went really well, really, really well. He has the cleanest arteries I have ever seen. And I was like, yeah, I kind of figured that. So we were pretty much able to determine that the medication, the interferon, had given him these symptoms. So then we had to have a very serious conversation of, can you work? If you're on this medication and it's causing you to have shortness of breath and heart palpitations, how are you able to work? So we sat down and we had that conversation of, I think you need to go on medical leave. And then from there, we need to apply for disability. And he was so opposed in the beginning. He was like, I don't want to go on disability. I don't feel like I need to go on disability. I feel like there are other people in the world that need that more than I do. And I said, but if you're not able to work and you're not bringing in an income, I can't do this all on my own. And so there was a guy in our church who was on disability, a Social Security disability, and we had a chat, we talked to him about it. And he pretty much looked at Walter and he was like, look, you have a rare disease, you're on medication, you don't know what the future is going to hold, if you're going to be able to work or not. I mean, you cannot put that financial burden on Kristine. It's like, there's no shame in being on Social Security disability. You've worked your whole life, you've put into that system. It's like, it is time for you to now be able to, utilize those services. It's like, if anybody, you certainly deserve it. And so I'm glad we were able to have that conversation with that person, because then Walter was able to see, yes, okay, people aren't going to think that I'm lazy because I can't work, because I really can't work. So we made an appointment to go to the Social Security office to apply for Social Security disability. And I will never forget sitting there and waiting. And then he gets called up. He gets called up to the window. And the woman was like, hi, how can I help you? And he was like, I need to apply for Social Security disability. The look on her face was like, oh, great, another one. I saw it immediately. And Walter, being Walter, just basically said, this is what's going on with me. And he told her the story of, how long it took to get the diagnosis. And this is a diagnosis, and I don't even know what the future is going to hold for me. When he finished telling his story, she was like, oh, honey, here are the forms that you need. Like, this is how you fill them out. This is how you return them to, like, she basically was like, yeah, you're one of the ones that this is a legitimate claim. And then leaving, God bless you. I hope all goes well. And so filling out the forms and knowing anytime you are applying for these types of services, especially with disability, you're going to be turned down repeatedly. Like, I think it's 3 times before they actually approve it, and that could take years to get approved. And I was like, how do we expedite this? We don't have years. I don't think that I could work full time and pick up extra shifts for years to supplement the loss of income. So through a little bit of research, there are these lawyers who that is what they specialize in, is, disability claims. And Walter contacted one, and they handle everything. All you have to do is just submit the medical, forms and notes from the doctors and the test, and how long it took to get the diagnosis, and they handle everything. And we never had to go before a judge to claim, yes, he's actually sick. Like, they handled everything, and it only took a year. And then his disability, so he was approved the first time. We never were denied, because we used these disability, we used the lawyer to handle that paperwork. And I was like, that is the best thing we have ever, like, anytime somebody would come to me, once they knew my husband was on Social Security disability, they said, well, what did you do and how did you get approved? And I said, we contacted a lawyer who specializes in, disability claims. He said, otherwise, if you try to do it on your own, you're looking at 3 to 5 years before you get approved. Lots of people don't have that kind of time. We didn't know if we had that kind of time. I know a lot of people like to try and do it on their own because they don't want to pay that fee. And I said that was the best 30% of his retroactive pay we've ever spent, because they deserved it. It was well worth it. Don't worry about that. You're going to, once you're approved, then once a month, you're going to, get your disability check. So I'm all for it. I would definitely advise people to do that. But then that's another area that you start to go into. Now we've got the diagnosis. How do we navigate this? How do we navigate everything that goes into taking care of somebody that has a rare disease that isn't even classified? How do you navigate all of the services out there? Are we even eligible for services other than the Social Security disability? So that's a lot. Getting the diagnosis, it turns out, was the easiest part. The hard part was now trying to figure out how to navigate this uncharted territory. Here, you have Erdheim-Chester disease, you have ECD. We don't have an instruction manual for you. You are, here you go, good luck to you. It's pretty much what it felt like.
I think that that's a great topic for our next episode, because there's so much to explore when you're dealing with a rare disease like this, and you have some great advice for people and some great stories to share. So I want to save that for the next episode, but I do want to say thank you for for sharing your story, for sharing everything that you did. It's such a vulnerable thing to do. And also, that was great advice that you gave on hiring an attorney for Social Security disability, because you are so right. It is well worth the money that you spend, uh, saving yourself the headache of and the heartache of having to go through all of that when you're already dealing with so much, when you have so much on your plate. I also appreciate, and I see it throughout your stories, how solid your relationship was with Walter, and that partnership is what carried you through. So, thank you so much for sharing all of this, Kristine, and I will see you next time.
Thank you, RuthAnn. Yes, I'm looking forward to the next episode. Talking more about Walter.